the Game of Thrones shitty MIDI returns. The best themes ever, in the best version ever, in MIDI form. This sums up Season 7 quite nicely, I agree. Alright, let's stop that and let's do this thing. I've been planning on doing this for a while, and finally we're here. Finally, it's a rainy day, and I decided to talk Season 7. Believe it or not, a number of people have requested that I do this, so I appreciate that. I'm glad my previous discussion of this series was decent enough for you to want more of it, I guess. I have a lot to say. I do have a lot to say. It will be opinionated garbage, but it'll be my opinionated garbage, and that counts for something to me. I did like the season. Game of Thrones Season 7 was definitely more good than it was bad, but I think we're just really used to a certain kind of quality from Game of Thrones that we didn't quite get this season. We got flashes of it, and we got a lot of really great spectacle moments and battles, and it was really interesting. We'll talk about it. Now, I am recording this. This will be on Full Sauce. There will be no visuals. This is just like podcast style. At some point, I'm going to ask questions. Also, be sure to comment. You could commit to whatever you want in life, but comment if you have any things that you want to add to my discussion, and maybe I'll check it out and talk about it. So I'm really not great at doing stuff like this without some people in the chat room. You know, like, it's always weird to just talk to a wall, but if I have a couple people listening, it feels more like a conversation. So why don't we jump right in and let's talk about, let me get the season summary up, like the episode summary, just so I know what the hell happened this season. Right. So here it is. So the first episode, Dragonstone, pretty much continues not too far after, or I would imagine not too far after the end of Season 6. And it is Arya poisoning the Freys. She was fucking pissed. This was the first kind of sign that we had. Well, not the first, but this was the biggest indication that Arya had gone full sociopath. She eliminated almost the entirety of the Frey family in one swoop. And I gotta say, the actor who plays Walder Frey, choice. That dude was incredible. Every scene he was ever in this show. Even him, Arya pretending to be him, like his mannerisms were a little different. So, I mean, it was a really good start to the season because we got to see a little bit about Arya, which is, she's becoming a little bit less likable, I feel. But we also got to see the end of the Frey house. This is what happens when you fuck with the Starks, I guess. I mean, it took a number of seasons to finally get revenge, which isn't, you know, it shouldn't be the main goal, but it was a goal. I mean, the Red Wedding was so fucked up. The Red Wedding, I think, was one of those moments, and I had read the books, and so I expected the Red Wedding on the show, but I will say that my heart was beating out of my chest. The Red Wedding was even worse on the show than it was in the books, and that to me was like one of the high points of the entire series, for 1,000 reasons, but just to show you how no one was really invincible. That changed a bit, but for a while there, anything could happen. People were fucking wiped out. Game of Thrones was a show that took risks, and one of the reasons it got so popular is because word of mouth was a huge aspect of it. I remember hearing about it from a number of friends before I jumped on board. But also, spoilers, the death of Ned Stark in episode 9 of season 1, they build Sean Bean as like the main character. In fact, there's a chart, someone made a chart of screen time for the entire series of every character. And Ned Stark still is in like the top 5 or something like that. Like he still, because of that one season, had some of the most screen time of the entire series. So you just kind of expect Ned Stark to be the main character. All the promotional materials, advertisements, and then, nope, not safe. Definitely not safe. In fact, I spent a week wondering if he was going to come back as a zombie or something, or maybe magic would bring him back, or maybe it was a jape. I mean, I just didn't expect that to happen, and it really hooked me. I mean, season 1 was as good of an opening season to get you invested in the world and the characters as any other show I've ever seen, and that's why I loved the show so much, because after season 1, I read the books and I got kind of obsessed. I will tell you that it's my favorite current show on television. Overall, I mean, at the moment, season 7 kind of had me a little disappointed here and there, but it's still one of my favorite shows ever. And they did a really great job adapting the material. They did a less good job writing new material. But before we get to season 7 in its entirety, I want to say, like, David and Dan, the creators of the show, had the potential to really create some good new scenes. Arya and Tywin at Harrenhal. That was one of the best aspects of the show that was not covered in the books. And I feel like something like that is a really big indication that they can write and they can adapt with new ideas. And, well, they had to simplify. The show and the books are two different beasts. And I'm not one of those like book snobs where, you know, oh, the books are better just because I read them. Like, no, I'm not going to hold that over anyone. I think the show is really great when it's at its best, and it's been at its best most of its run. So to me, that shows you that David and Dan did a great job adapting the material. They had some great directors. They had some really good... the casting in this show is fucking perfect. I mean, I've never really even had a single complaint with any of the cast. It's always been on point, and I really, really appreciate what they do and how they go through great lengths to make sure that the characters are just right. I think my favorite casting was Tyrion, of course, but also Jaime. The Lannisters were perfect, but I mean, Sean Bean is Ned Stark. Amazing. That's why it sucks we only got one season. Also, I'm looking at that chart, and it's so here's screen time of GOT characters. I don't know if this covers season 7. I think this is just through 1 through 6. So Tyrion, Jon, Dany, Cersei, Sansa, Arya, Jaime, Theon, Samwell, Jorah, Littlefinger, and Ned is number 11. I believe. So, I mean, he's just still ahead of Brienne and Davos and Bran. Ned Stark, as of season 6, had more screen time than Bran Stark, than Varys, than Tywin Lannister, than Robb Stark, than Stannis Baratheon, than Sandor the Hound Clegane, which is just an indication of how, you know, you really are led to believe that this is going to be the main character. But Game of Thrones has had at its best moments a very true representation of the source material, and I feel like that kind of made it work so much better. You know, there was an eloquence to the writing, the adapt. You know, I mean, they had to adapt some of the text and cut it down a bit and give people lines that they might not have said for a couple books later or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, they mixed and matched a bit, and I appreciate that, because it made for a more understandable viewing experience. When you have a book that has so many characters, dozens upon dozens of main characters, or at least primary focus characters, you know, not the POV characters, that's a different thing, point of view. Then you have hundreds of peripheral characters. It's got to be a difficult task. They had to combine some characters. They had to cut some characters like Strong Belwas. For those that don't know, Strong Belwas is this rotund figure that is in Daenerys's army that when I think they're sieging Marine, he just takes a big dump. He just takes a big shit, like right in the entrance to Marine. It was a very memorable scene in the book, but you don't get that in the show, so rip Strong Belwas. So yeah, I mean, the adaptation of the material was very, very good, mostly. Sand Snakes definitely sucked. I was really happy to see them cut that storyline short. I'm sad that Dorne got so butchered, but at the same time, I think it really needed to happen. Lady Stoneheart, we didn't see her. There's a lot of things we wanted to see that didn't happen, and some of the things that did happen were awful. Fucking Doran Martell, played by Alexander Siddig from Star Trek Deep Space Nine. I love that guy. He was in like 5 scenes. And then it was like, oh, well, we jump ship, abandon ship, sand snakes suck. No one likes them. Get them out of here. And, fuck. So they were capable of mistakes. But I think, and people are going to hate me, I think, for this, because I'm just going to be a broken record, as everyone else is lately, complaining about the show. Season 7 had the weakest writing of any season. And I have some theories why. Before we go into the characters, before we go into the events, and then eventually questions from you guys, I would like to just for a moment talk about the writing. And well, last night, or was it 2 nights ago, Rick and Morty finished airing, and Adult Swim had a bumper at the end of the episode that said the writing on Game of Thrones 2011 to 2016, and that caused a bit of a shitstorm, leading the Rick and Morty creators to deny knowledge of such a bumper ever happening. And they were like, we had nothing to do with it. We love Game of Thrones. But it's kind of true. I feel like that was one of the sad things, is that season 6 was a very strong season. Even though it was in new territory. It was still adapting some stuff. It was able to take its time with the material. The Arya stuff in Bravos was butchered, but it was still a pretty strong season, and I feel like the material that they had, whatever they had from the books, they were able to extrapolate and go a little further with it for season 6. Season 7, they're out in the open. They didn't have much. George probably told them, here's what's going to happen. Here's the main points. Here's where it's going to be. And then I feel like David and Dan just threw darts at a board, like a map of Westeros, to get them there. And it didn't really work for me. There's a lot that did work, and I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to praise the season because it had some great moments. But I will say, with season 7, they cut down the amount of time. This is not a secret. They had to cut it from, I think this is budgetary reasons, actually, 10 episodes to 7. I feel like those extra 3 episodes would have greatly improved the show, because this season zoomed along at the speed of fucking light, and it led to a lot of inconsistencies, and just it felt like they were cheating a lot in a world that had some fairly strict and grounded rules. This is a fantasy series, yes, but it doesn't start complete fantasy. I mean, it's much more grounded, and now it's like more dragons and magic, but it still was grounded enough in reality that characters could die at any time, and here's what you can't do in Westeros. I feel like a lot of that has been stretched a bit. And that has to do with 3 less episodes. It also has to do with, and this is just a rumor, don't shoot the messenger, I've heard on a couple of occasions that David and Dan are just ready to move on to their next project, and they're getting a little bit impatient. They're a little done. They're a little over Game of Thrones, and they want to continue with new projects. That explains a lot, I think. I feel like the writing was definitely rushed. I feel like the season was rushed. So yeah, someone in chat says it seems more like a fan fiction opposed to some coherent story-based writing. Now, Jeff explained it. Jeff Reds explained it in a way I thought was interesting, which is it's a really, really good fan fiction. It's not Game of Thrones entirely. It's not A Song of Ice and Fire, but it's a really good take on it. And I agree with that. At its best, there was a very minimal difference. But when it gets too far from the source material, it does feel like a fan fiction. Still one of the best shows on TV. Make no mistake. The complaining, I should point out, has to do with the comparison. It's Game of Thrones at its best is Game of Thrones now's worst enemy, if that sentence makes sense. I feel like you kind of can't compare Game of Thrones to too much on TV. Maybe now you can a little bit because TV's kind of like adjusting a bit. Game of Thrones did do a lot, but at the same time, this show, when it was at its best, is I heard it described as a steak as compared to like popcorn where it's at now. The thing is, I would even say that the final episode of season 7 redeemed a lot of that through some really, really solid character moments. So let's get into it for real this time. For real. What can we talk about that was good? Let's start with good. Instead of going episode by episode, why don't we do an overview? Well, what I liked Sam's story. Sam had a bit of a character arc. His character arc was he went from this really timid, meek character with no confidence, becomes a maester at the Citadel, or at least is training to become a maester, ends up curing Jorah the Explorer, has, it's disgusting what he ends up doing at the Citadel, but he does it, and he gets, over time, more and more accustomed to the things that he finds gross, ends up doing probably the most disgusting surgery in all of Westeros. Also, one of the best transitions from scene to scene was when he starts cutting the shit off of Jorah, and then it goes to a knife being stabbed into a pie. Whatever the name of that scene is, or whatever that kind of transition's called, that was probably the best one of those I've ever seen. So, yeah, I really loved Sam this season. His character arc is really being realized, and you don't see a lot of Sam, but what you do see of him, it feels good. It feels really good. It doesn't feel dumb. It doesn't feel contrived. For me, it felt good. Again, this is all just how I feel about this stuff. So yeah, I was pretty happy with Sam, his whole Oldtown thing, and then him deciding like, shit, these maesters suck. The acting was great, by the way. Jim Broadbent as the head maester was fantastic. By the way, Professor Slugworth, that dude, loved that dude. He was in Hot Fuzz. He's in so much good stuff, but he was stalwart, and the maesters would just laugh, and they didn't really believe Sam. So he said, you know what, fuck this. And again, Sam finds some more strength, and he realizes that he has to do something. So he gets some books, steals them, and leaves the Citadel and heads to Winterfell. I really liked that. I thought that was great. And I thought, it took him a little bit longer than expected, but it happened. And also, here's a dude who wanted to be a maester, and he finally gets there, and he's like amazed by it. But he knows what he has to do is more important than being a maester, and he leaves. So again, that storyline was handled great. Going back to, and then he meets with Internet Bran. Before we go into too much detail about Bran, I'll just say I love that Sam is one of the most curious characters. He reads books. He wants to learn about things. He wants to find ways to help the characters through knowledge, not through sword fight and shoot. But he meets up with Bran in the final episode, and Bran is basically the internet. And to me, that's kind of perfect. So now Sam is going to be browsing BranNet, you know. We also learned a lot about Bran's powers and their limits in the final episode of season 7. We'll talk about that in a bit. So very, I thought that was a cool scene. Okay, so Bran, Sam, Arya. Let's go back to Arya for a second. Arya starts the episode, and you find out that in the first episode, she's very sociopathic, and she's kind of scary, and she fucking eliminates the entirety of House Frey for the most part. And that was like, you know, you can't deny it. You can't deny it felt good on some level, because the Freys were fucking bitter, cold, just awful, awful people. And the Red Wedding was one of the worst scenes ever. I mean, I rewatched the commentary that Michelle Fairley and Robb Stark's actor, Richard Madden, did for a DVD where they watched the Red Wedding for the first time. And the actors are watching it and crying. And it is heartbreaking. And it made me made me really sad. And they, you know, they were like, they were not happy about watching that scene. And they said it brought back a lot of, you know, good memories, but also a lot of bad memories. Like, oh fuck, this is the end. Definitely one of the most gut-wrenching death scenes ever. So in some ways, it's satisfying to see Arya put an end to the Freys, and I'm happy she did. But you know, the character is, she went from, you know, tomboy to tomboy for a while again, and then just escape, trying to get out of King's Landing and whatever shitty situation she was in. Then she goes to Braavos, and they kind of butchered that storyline a bit. You know, I didn't know how long the ninja training lasted, but she became a ninja. All right. Very cold, but she ends up becoming this assassin in Braavos, and, you know, however she got there, great. But does it pay off? Well, at the cost of some of her character, of what made her character endearing, I feel like it does. And she's able to do these amazing things that are just beyond what most people can do. She can wear faces. Her skills with a sword are fucking unbelievable. So, yeah, I mean, she's a fucking assassin. This is where I felt like the arc was going from the beginning. I always, when I was reading through Dance with Dragons, I felt like she was going to end up being a Stark again. And now that she's a Stark again, she's pretty, yeah. You know, she goes to kill Cersei. That was the thing. You see her with Hot Pie, and there's a crossroads, like, you know, and instead of going to King's Landing, she goes to Winterfell. I really like that scene. That was one of those show don't tell moments where it was her looking at the both paths, and after learning that Jon was alive and the king in the north, she says to herself, I'm going to go see Jon. I'm going to see my family. I'm going to go back to Winterfell. I really like that moment. That was the humanity. But, you know, I mean, that's also after her and Ed Sheeran hanging out. Remember that controversy? How minor that is compared to some of the glaring problems of season 7 now. But yeah, Arya hung out with Ed Sheeran in a forest, and it was really distracting because he was like, you know, that's my newest song. It's like, yeah, I know, mate. I know who you are, but could you maybe just not talk? You know, if you're going to put Ed Sheeran in a scene, just keep him in the background, you know. But he was there. He was in frame. And from what I understand, they did that because Maisie's a big fan of Ed Sheeran. All right. Well, I mean, you know, have him come to the set to say hello one day. Fucking hell. Anyway, that scene with the Lannisters was interesting to me because it did show, it served a purpose. It actually had a purpose, which is that Arya may be a little sociopathic. She may be this assassin. She may have lost a lot of her humanity, or at least some of it. But she can recognize that even the Lannister soldiers, even the enemy, you know, they're people. And that was a thing I really appreciated. It felt a little hammy because it just so happened at the exact right moment. but I enjoyed the implication of it, and I appreciate that it happened. So she goes back to Winterfell, and then there's reunions that are. This is a season of reunions and pairings. And I'll say this: I liked the reunions. They were really like weird to see after like 6 years of one's life. You're invested in this show, and then like, holy fuck, these two characters are together again, or they're on screen for the first time. That was the strength of season 7, which is sad to say, the fan service, but it worked. It was effective, and it was nice to see Arya and Sna come back together. But what followed was probably one of the most convoluted, pointless plots in all of Game of Thrones, which is the Littlefinger stuff and the betrayal and Sansa and Arya's quarreling, which was done specifically for the purpose of the audience and not because of the characters. So why don't we talk about that for a second? Let's go there. Let's talk about Littlefinger, and we'll talk about the Arya Sansa thing. Arya and Sansa had a bit of a rocky history with each other, and they had problems. We know this. You know, Arya was the tomboy. She wanted to go and fight and shoot bows and use swords and be with her brothers. And Snoot wanted to be a princess with dresses and look nice and be in King's Landing. And it was two very different things. And that was played upon in this arc. Now, Sansa, her arc, I didn't really care for very much, but it kind of works because she ends up finding the strength that I didn't know she had until episode 7, really. But she ends up, going through this terrible shit throughout the whole show. Just one bad thing after another. Fucking Littlefinger saves her, betrays her, does all kinds of stupid shit with her, and teaches her. He's kind of in some ways teaching her the ways of the Littlefinger, which is to say a conniving scumbag. But it's effective because with Sansa, she is deep down a good person, and she especially after the stuff with Ramsay Bolton, she learns this like kind of this evil, and she also finds the strength to get over it. And that's something that I appreciate in a character sense. And also seeing her become the Lady of Winterfell was cool. I mean, it's just nice to have Winterfell have Starks in them again, in it again. But the whole Sansa thing was just, it felt so weird, and she still kind of gets infuriating at sometimes. Sansa's been one of the more frustrating characters with her decisions, but it really wasn't the character's fault. It was the writing's fault in some ways, because this season in particular, they shoehorned Arya and Sansa into this weird fucking plot. Now listen, if you've seen the show, I don't need to go over the entire detail of what happened. You've seen it. My thoughts on it are as follows. It made no sense. A lot of the time, Arya and Sansa were just alone and fighting with each other or saying dumb things, and Arya became even more sociopathic, psychopathic even, and I'm not really sure that needed to happen. I guess they just wanted something to happen with these characters. They had Winterfell. We got to go to Winterfell. We got to film stuff there. We got to have a storyline there. We have to have something play out. Oh, we have a Littlefinger storyline that's unresolved. What do we do with him? And that takes us to Littlefinger. This is the character that probably started. He's probably the most influential character in the entire show for the events that we saw unfold, which is why I really appreciate his character. He fucking set the ball rolling through manipulation, scheming, creeping, lots of shots of Littlefinger in a dark doorway with half of his face obscured by a fucking wall. So that happened a lot, but he was still a good character. One of the best written characters, I think, up until season 6. And I'll say this, Littlefinger was probably a difficult character to write for. And I think one of the reasons the books are taking so long to come out is probably 1,000 things, but it's all trying to tie every one of these storylines together and also keep the characters interesting and relevant. And I think George is having a really tough time with that. That's just my perspective on it. But, then you have David and Dan in a writer's room, and they're much less skilled. And then you have season 6, and Littlefinger's just creeping. And, Snasna summons him and gets the Knights of the Vale and everything. Season 7, what the fuck are you going to do with him? He was much less vital. Originally, you get the idea Littlefinger's going to be on the throne, or he wants to be really, really badly. And that was the part of the character that gave him strength. Another thing that gave him strength was his love of Catelyn, but it also gave him weakness because with Snasna, he kind of fell for her, and he ended up giving her way too much of his plans. He was counting on her to be on his side the whole time. And that is a bit of a problem because that was his undoing. But I feel like a lot of the focus of the character was lost around season 6, especially season 7. And he ended up kind of going from these great big old, schemes to lurking around a corner and trying to split up two sisters. And that was really what I didn't like. I get that it might have been difficult to write, but it just felt so lame. And he kind of just, planted some shitty evidence. That note, by the way, that Arya found was so stupid. And obviously Arya knew better. But the fact that Littlefinger thought this note would split the sisters up is just beyond comprehension for a character that smart. So, whatever. I mean, a lot of these scenes before we hit episode 7, a lot of these scenes of Sansa and Arya were just like, are these characters this dumb? After all they've been through, they're doing this. And it was for no one's benefit but the audience. There is no reason for these characters to do this. And even David and Dan, when they explained these scenes, it was like, well, we wanted to build the tension and the drama so that by the time you get to the room when Littlefinger's in there, the audience is full of suspense. It's like, yeah, but that's not a good in-world character motivation. And for a show that values that, you're not doing anything particularly good here. So I was a little disappointed with that, and it was annoying. What I did like was the resolution. Again, makes no sense. If they wanted to kill Littlefinger, or if they wanted to out Littlefinger, they didn't have to go through all this deception. They could have done it right from the start. They had a cheat code. They had Bran Stark, who knows most of the things that Littlefinger was doing, even recited them back to him. So why they had to have this little charade for no reason, where they call Arya into the room. How do you feel about your crimes, Lord Baelish? It's like, wait a minute, who are they saying that for? That's for the audience. So it was pretty transparent for me. It was still an exciting moment, if you turn your brain off a little bit, and I'm glad that it happened. It was Aidan Gillen, I think that's how you pronounce his name, fucking killed it. He did a great job in that scene, and he sold this desperation of Littlefinger. What I liked about the scene was the Bran just calling him out on his bullshit. It was so cathartic. It felt so good to finally have Littlefinger have all this crap thrown back in his face. Like, you held a knife to Ned Stark's throat. You instigated this war. You did so much. You did so much stuff that you needed to pay for. You killed Lysa Arryn, and he's just like, give me a chance, bro. And then he's like, hey, Knights of the Vale, can you get me the fuck out of here? But they already knew. They already knew that he was a scumbag, so they just said no. Which, again, made this thing, this farce, this mummer's farce, even less vital. but it happened. And then he begs, which I appreciate the begging because some people have said, well, why would Littlefinger beg? And I think for me, the reason is simply he couldn't talk his way out of this one. Here's a character who has been able to talk his way out of every situation he's ever been in. Can't do it. Can't get Sansa on his side. And so they just, they just off him. And Arya uses the dagger, which I thought was a nice touch. She uses the dagger that started this whole thing, or at least, got Bran into the internet. So crazy, convoluted nonsense plot, ultimately satisfying to see the sisters work together and come together, blah, blah, blah. And Littlefinger, is a loose end. Part of me expected him to sit on the throne just before it gets nuked by a dragon. Or something like that. Like, that was my kind of expectation for Littlefinger. What if he ended up getting the throne and then all of King's Landing is destroyed? That could have been interesting. Another character that ended up not having a whole lot was Varys. Here's a character that, in the books, he's got a different goal, an ancillary goal, if you will. Let me look up that word and see if I'm using it properly. Ancillary. Not at all. Not even close. All right, great. Peripheral. He had a different goal. He had a side quest goal. He had his goal was to get some fake Targaryen who may have been a Blackfire back on the throne. That whole plot was cut. The book had this character called Young Griff, who they were saying was Aegon Targaryen, and they were trying to get him, plus the Golden Company, back to Westeros so that he could be on the throne, and Varys was pushing for him. And since that was cut, show Varys is pretty much just like the good of the realm. The good of the realm. And that was kind of it. I don't know if there was ever going to be more than that, but that's really all we got. Season 7 Varys has a couple things to say. He's like kind of a glorified servant. He's just in the background. Here's one of the biggest players in the entire series, and he's just kind of sitting there, especially at the end there in the Dragons Arena. He's just sitting there looking. I think he had like one line of dialogue. And it's kind of weird because Littlefinger and Varys were, in some ways, the heart of the show for a while, and they were pulling so many of the strings, and they got all of these events in motion. In some ways, you can say that the events were set in motion by them, and the players then made the rest happen. That's fine. I can accept that. But I'll also say that I feel like it would be nice to have Varys be a little more essential. He didn't do a whole lot. And I like Varys, but having a little more below the surface was always a benefit to the character. Having him be just late jolly bald man who wants everyone to be happy. That's cool. But, you wanted it a little bit. I think I wanted a little more. Like, I wanted more of the spider and not Mr. Clean, So that's kind of my feel about Varys. Great character. Definitely feels like he got shafted along with Littlefinger in season 7, while Littlefinger got a little more than shafted. But he's he's gone now. Loose end. Bye-bye. What else? Let's talk about Bran. Because Bran is one of those characters that was also probably very difficult to write for. Bran's whole story was crippled, some bad shit happens, has to go beyond the wall, has to become the Three-Eyed Raven. So I wouldn't say that his stories were always my favorite in the books, but they kept it interesting enough. We don't know how long he was in the Three-Eyed Raven's Tree Shack of Love, but he was there for a while, and he ends up learning before the whole Hodor incident, which is still probably one of the better moments of the entire series, in my opinion. But season 7, Bran, he returns to the wall. Dolorous Ed, that magnificent son of a bitch, opens the door for him, and we don't really see Dolorous Ed a whole lot more after that, which is a shame. You want to see more of him, but Bran goes to Winterfell, and he's lost a lot of his humanity by doing this, and I can appreciate that, because if you know that much, if you begin to warg into things in the past, and you can see things in the present, that's I guess that makes sense in some ways. I don't dislike that Bran lost a lot of his humanity. He says, "I'm no longer Bran Stark" to Mira, and it was a sad scene. She did so much for him. She sacrificed so much for him, and she ended up losing her brother because of Bran. Not specifically because of him. Well, yeah, kind of. But it ends up being a sad thing. And then Bran's like passing some creepy comments. Like, "You were beautiful the night that Ramsay forced his way upon you." What the fuck are you talking about, Bran? No, you don't say that. I mean, in all your wisdom, you should still have some ability to discern the right and wrong thing to say in a situation. I can't wait for him and Jon to meet up again. "You were so beautiful the night you were stabbed to death." Or him and Daenerys. "You were so beautiful the night Khal Drogo." Anyway, the point is, poor Bran lost so much of himself to become an internet. But it's got to be a tough one. Also, did they mention Rickon's name? No, Rickon, that's another thing. And Rickon was killed last season, and no one really talks about Rickon. I mean, from a show perspective, the kid did not have very much character at all. Probably had 3 or 4 lines, but no one seems to mention him. There wasn't a single moment of "Our brother Rickon died so we could get this castle back." Nothing like that. We just kind of, we're just moving on. So, yeah, it's a little sad, but, Bran is definitely the hardest character to wrangle, because that's the character that has the cheat codes. That ruins most of the momentum of the story if you have a character that can see everything and predict everything, which is why the rules that we learned at the end of episode 7 were kind of important. He can see the past. He can see the present. He can see everything. However, he has to know where he's going or get lucky. So when Sam tells him about the wedding, he can then go there. So he needs a little guidance. He needs to know what the fuck is going on. So if say he were to find out that Tywin Lannister took a shit and there was actually gold in the shit for real, he could go there and find out. But I think there's still that limitation. He's learning to get better at his power with his ability. But for the writers, that has to be a bit of a nightmare, because it's too easy. But that said, I think the balance that David and Dan did was appropriate. Bran came through a couple times, especially with Littlefinger. But I also feel like we didn't see a lot of Bran. There were a couple episodes he just wasn't there. And I think most of the Littlefinger plot would have been completely eliminated if there were more scenes with Bran and Sansa and Arya, which is where the sloppy writing comes in, of how do we build tension for the audience and give these characters something to do, as opposed to, well, logically, what would happen? They would talk to Bran, they would find out this stuff, they would put Littlefinger on trial, maybe Littlefinger flees, maybe he goes back to King's Landing, maybe, here's what I would have done, maybe he would have went back with Cersei and told her the plans, and maybe at the meeting in the Dragon Bowl or wherever they were, you could have had a really good scene with Varys and Littlefinger, and the truth would have come out, and maybe at that point, both characters die, or Littlefinger dies, maybe Cersei kills him, You know what I mean? Maybe there could have been more like that, something like that, as opposed to, well, I'm going to creep around the corner because I love Sansa. It's too weird. Anyway, so yeah, Bran is cheat codes, and Bran says weird shit, but we also get probably one of my favorite scenes of the entire season, which is the end of the episode 7, the end of episode 7, where there's a Bran voiceover. He has to know, or we should tell him, something like that. We'll get back to that in a second. Let's talk about the Lannisters for a moment, because Tyrion hasn't had a whole lot to do. I feel like Tyrion's just been one bad plan after another. Tyrion's made a number of boners mistakes, just in case you didn't know. And he's also had a number of really kind of autopilot Tyrion scenes where it's just him being the wise little dwarf and making a little joke here and there. And it didn't really feel like the strength that Tyrion has as a character that we're used to. When he's with Jaime, there's some really good acting from Peter Dinklage. And that plot made no sense. We need to talk about that, because Tyrion proposes that they capture a dragon, or capture a White Walker, a zombie, to show Cersei, which is one of the dumbest plans of all time, perhaps in the history of plans. And the idea of them, then Davos smuggling Tyrion into King's Landing, and they get to the island, they get to King's Landing. In the daytime, even though everyone wants to kill the Lannisters, 2 fucking numbskulls are guarding this particular beach. Okay, they're just there. And they're not even there at first. They're there later. And and they get there, and then Jaime and Tyrion meet somehow. Tyrion, even though he's not really that well disguised, I mean, he's very recognizable, he manages to get into the castle and meet with Jaime. It's like, what the fuck is this? How did they do this? Good acting, fair enough. And then he returns. Then there's a bit about fermented crabs giving you actual boners, which I thought was kind of funny. Fermented crab is apparently now a meme on the internet. But anyway, the point is, the guards show up, and finally, then Gendry, fan service Gendry, you still rowing, lad, does the thing and kills them. But it just felt so like, they just snuck on in like that. Oh, come on. Gendry is cool. Gendry has shown up again, and everyone has been joking that Gendry was rowing for many seasons, but he's back, and it turns out he just wants out of his shitty life, and he wanted to join in, and he's the world's fastest runner who does not, in fact, have his lungs explode when running in the Arctic cold. So that's cool. Just the character we needed. And it kind of, is fine. He got to use a hammer. He's got a little hammer. He really owns his family identity. Him and Jon are fan servicey friends from the start. And, no problems there. It's good to see the character again. Not as hype as I thought it would be, but he's back. So, anyway, back to Tyrion. Tyrion proposes this stupid plan, and he's got a lot of words for the queen and, for Daenerys. And his whole arc throughout the whole series has been really good. He's been one of the best characters this entire show. And it has a lot to do with Peter Dinklage's acting and the writing. And then you get to season 6, and you don't get as much good Tyrion stuff. And he's not the main focus. And then season 7, it almost felt like, well, we need to have this character do something. Because in a lot of ways, this season was about Jon and Dany. Those are the 2 driving forces, I feel, of this series. So at the moment, Cersei, of course, as well. But Tyrion's been kind of relegated to this advisor role, and it's been a little sad to see that, because he's got so much more to offer. But when you get to episode 7, and you find, Tyrion wants to go and talk to Cersei, I was clenched. Episode 7 was good overall, but the dialogue between Tyrion and Cersei was probably some of the best of the entire show. That brought me back to seasons 2 and 3 and 4, like when the dialogue was really on point. And I loved that scene because it had everything I wanted. And it was tense. It was really tense. So, I mean, Tyrion, has balls of steel that he was able to do that and negotiate some kind of peace, because at this point, Cersei, again, I'm skipping around. There's just so much to cover. There's so much to talk about. I'm not going to be able to touch on everything, but I can tell you the stuff I liked and I didn't like. But Cersei had a really great manipulation tactic with Tyrion. I'm not sure she's actually pregnant. There's, rumors that she's not, or theories, that she's not. I think the only time she actually mentions her pregnancy is when she's manipulating. And that is something that really annoys me, because if she was really pregnant, you would think it would be more of, a natural thing. I'll give you an example. In episode 7, when the zombie runs towards Cersei, you can see the fear in her eyes. She is scared of this fucking thing. She doesn't hold her stomach, though. And I guess if you're pregnant, in some ways, the first reaction might be to, guard your baby, and she doesn't do that. So maybe that's an oversight, but maybe it's an indication that she's actually not pregnant. I mean, maybe I'm giving the writers too much credit, but that's a thing. Lena Headey is amazing. She is one of the best actresses on the show, and she does not disappoint. She's continued to drive this character and to really sell the character in a way that is just amazing. So I love, I hate Cersei, but I love her portrayal, and it's just no complaints. Duplicitous to the very last, too. I mean, just the amount of crazy shit she did all season was just like, come on, really? Is this who you are? Wow, you really fucked up, didn't you? And she does fuck up a lot, but she also owns it. She feels like she's right. Hang on a second. She feels like she's right. She feels righteous about this stuff. She feels justified. She's got enemies everywhere. She's filled with wrath and hatred. And which takes us to Jaime for a moment. Jaime is my favorite character in the books. He's got a great character arc. He is, in some ways, like a tragic hero, and a very imperfect character. And in the books, Jaime leaves Cersei's evil grasp, so to speak, a lot earlier. And in the show, he just continues to, he's there by her side for most of the show. And it took him the final episode of the penultimate season to wake the fuck up. Again, if you've seen the show, I don't need to explain the plot, but the whole plot of season 7, in a way, was this is a real threat. The White Walkers are real. We need to take care of this. We need to have an alliance. Jon and Dany make the alliance successfully, and then they do a little more than that, but they try to get Cersei on board. And that whole thing in the arena, the dragon arena, was, I thought, pretty well handled. It was good. I can see what they wanted to do, which is to say, listen, we need to put our differences aside. We need to handle this. And of course, even with the ice zombie, Cersei doesn't give a shit. She's more concerned about her control. She wants to eliminate her enemies, and she wants to be in control. She a bitch. And Jaime was committed to doing the right thing, because the way it goes, she lies and she says, I will send my troops up north with you and we will fight the threat together as long as you consider me. That's after Tyrion speaks to her. So Jaime's on board. Jaime realizes, holy fucking shit, there's a real problem. And I'm going to, without even like thinking about it, Jaime is already much more honorable than he was in, say, season 1. You know, here's a character who's had some real, finally healthy friendships with someone other than his sister, which is to say him and Brienne. He finds out his brother did not kill Joffrey. And, you know, the stuff that he's gone through and seen, he finally gets to the point where he's just, it's an automatic response where he's going to do the right thing. He's going to go and fight the White Walkers with Jon and Dany. Fuck the realm if there is no realm. You know, fuck King's Landing if there is no King's Landing. You need to do this. The scene with he and Cersei in season 7, in episode 7, I keep saying that, episode 7, where they're in the room, the map room, and the mountain is there. And she calls him the stupidest Lannister. That scene was, my heart was beating out of my chest. It was really crazy. It was really, really crazy because I thought Jaime was going to bite it. And I'm not even sure Jaime fully knew that Cersei was bluffing. I'm not sure Cersei knew she was bluffing. Maybe the mountain just didn't get the order correct. That's what Nikolai Coster-Waldau said in an interview. He was like, maybe the mountain just doesn't understand commands. But whatever the case was, it was heartbreaking to see Jaime betrayed like that. And you can see Cersei's officially, she's got no one now. All she has is revenge and power. And it's not even real power. It's not her God-given right. She is not, as we know, in any way entitled to this throne. And poor Jaime Lannister, who finally has come around, fucking kicked to the floor by his shitty sister. She may not even be pregnant. I mean, who knows? Even if she is. So, yeah, it was a really sad scene. I'm glad that Jaime did not die. I feel like there is a little bit more for him to do. There's been some theories about him killing the Night King, which is going to turn his Kingslayer title from a curse into a blessing. You know, maybe he'll use Widow's Wail or whatever the fuck that stupid sword is. Joffrey always was a cunt, wasn't he? But yeah, it was a really, really, really good moment to see Jaime finally, you know, he steps out of King's Landing and there's the snow. The first winter has fallen in King's Landing and he's going to head north and he's got to hide his golden hand, you know, but he's going to try to warn them, I would imagine, that holy shit, Cersei's going to betray you first chance she gets. And she's going to hire the Golden Company. So yeah, it was pretty crazy stuff. But again, Jaime in the books realizes much earlier, and you know, there's a lot of thoughts. You get point of view chapters of Jaime, and the thoughts, you know, about Cersei fucking Moonboy for all he knows. You don't get that in the show, and you kind of can't in a lot of ways. You can't really get to know the character's inner thoughts in a TV show, and that's where the book medium will always kind of have that advantage. But you still get the acting, and you get to see the betrayal in Jaime's face when Cersei makes it clear, like, you know, she doesn't want him to leave. You can't walk away from me. No one does. You know, Jaime's just that look it was heartbreaking. Really, really big props. Can I still say props? Is that a 90s phrase? But props to Jaime, to Nikolai Coster-Waldau for his acting with Jaime. It's always been solid, but there's some moments where he just totally just shines through, and it's like, wow, okay, this guy's got chops. But so that's the Lannisters. Like, you know, a lot of, again, Jaime just doing nothing. There was a couple of things that I enjoyed this season with Jaime, and that includes the epic loot crate battle, which is the I think episode 4, where the dragon attacks the Dothraki screamers in an open field. They attack the Lannister soldiers, and Jaime and Bronn are there, and Bronn teaches Drogon how to dodge with the crossbow. But you have this really huge battle scene, which looked beautiful, by the way. I really love that battle scene. That, I think, stands up with some of the best of the entire series. So I'm really, really pleased with how that went. And then Jaime does the ultimate in stupid things, which is he charges Daenerys, with a lance. And then Bronn knocks him out of the way, saves his life. Jaime goes underwater. And then, miraculously, Jaime appears just the next day. He's, or a couple minutes later, he's like a mile away. He's away from the battle. And no sense of geography. Bronn pulls him out, and they're fine. They're not captured. They're not captured at all. They're just there. It was really disappointing. I was expecting some kind of thing to happen, or at least maybe they would I thought maybe they were going to get captured, and Tyrion was going to let Jaime go, which would have been a nice parallel to Catelyn Stark letting Jaime go. That way they could have spoken there and not had Tyrion go to King's Landing. So another just weird plot point. But I guess they needed Gendry, so okay. Well, whatever. Jaime has proven twice this season that he's got some of the biggest balls of any character on the show. Charging Daenerys, trying to end the war, and then walking out on his sister while her mountain is there, ready to strike him down. Pretty intense stuff from Jaime this season, and I'm glad to see that he finally hit the story beat that I needed him to hit, which is the redemption arc, seeing Cersei for who she is. So let's talk a minute about Tyrion in the meeting with Cersei. So there's some fun fan theories happening right now that we didn't see all of the meeting on purpose. During boat sex, Tyrion looks very guilty. If you look at his face, he's seeing them hooking up, or he's hearing them hooking up, which is kind of weird, bro. But he definitely looks like he's got a guilty conscience. So there's this theory that Tyrion knew that Cersei would never agree to this. So much like he asked Jon Snow to lie, he tells Cersei to lie. I don't know what the plan is. Some are saying it's betrayal. Maybe what we didn't hear in the conversation was Tyrion saying something like this: look, let them fight. You can do what you want in the meantime, but just, pledge some troops or just lie or whatever. We need to keep the kingdom safe. I'm not sure. Maybe there was a manipulation tactic with her pregnancy that he felt so guilty about Myrcella and Tommen, which, by the way, was not his fault. Cersei says that Tommen was his fault. Absolutely not. Tommen was Cersei's fault. She killed Marjorie. She killed, everyone. And she expected Tommen to be totally okay with this. So, yeah, it was definitely not Tyrion's fault. But maybe Tyrion felt guilty, and he sees, oh, God, I have another nephew. What can I do to keep him safe? And maybe he made some kind of deal. I don't know. I'm not sure. But it seems suspect. And she, gave up pretty easily. She came back. She could have easily just said no. So who the hell knows, man? People think he offered Cersei to let her child be Dany's heir, since Dany's supposed to be barren. Yeah, I mean, then in that case, fair enough. But then Cersei betrayed him, as usual. I guess that would make sense. But I know Tyrion, there's another theory that Tyrion was just disappointed that they were together, because maybe he mentioned breaking the wheel. He mentioned democracy. Maybe Tyrion wanted to change the way this country was ruled, and he feels like monarchy is corrupt, and he sees Jon and Dany getting together, and he's like, well, what if she can get pregnant? Or maybe he's thinking, well, you know, if her and Jon get together, my advice will be less valuable. She'll listen to him over me. There's a couple of explanations for the guilty look on his face, but I mean, who knows? You know, that we'll find out next season. Hopefully with the 6 episodes, they'll be long enough that we can actually get some fucking storyline and not fast travel around. Let's talk about fast travel real quick, because we got some fast traveling that happened. So one of the things that disappointed me most was last episode, not the episode 6. So the second to last episode. Hang on. Man, talking for this long, uninterrupted, that'll do a number on your throat, man. At least when I'm streaming, I can let the game just do its thing for a bit and shut the fuck up. But when you have a world that's as big as Westeros, you would expect there to be a little bit more travel time. The first 6 seasons were all travel time. Season 7 throws a lot of that stuff out the window. Now, yes, I know this is going to be a complaint about fast travel, but I have a way to fix at least one of them. So the dumb plot of them going beyond the wall was to get the characters together and have a battle sequence. And also to get the Night King a dragon, which was cool as fuck, by the way. But the plan itself did nothing for me. And I feel like every time these characters get together on some kind of mission, it just feels like they're aching for a battle, fighting around the world. But anyway, it doesn't matter. That's fine. They get there. You know, it's cool. They're talking. Jorah's got some great dialogue scenes. Tormund and the Hound are together. You know, they're doing all this stuff, and it's like, wow, these characters are great. The Magnificent Seven. And a bunch of fucking red shirts. Like just some random wildlings that have no dialogue. We don't learn anything about them. You know, in Hardhome, we learn about some of the wildlings. We get some character. But Hardhome was also directed by Miguel Sapochnik, who is a brilliant director. I don't know. Let's see who directed episode 6. Alan Taylor. I don't know what episodes he's directed. Let's see. Game of Thrones. He's directed Soprano stuff. He directed... We haven't seen Alan Taylor on Game of Thrones since season 2. And none of them were big battle sequences. So, I don't know. I mean, he didn't sell me on this because, again, you have all these just random, unknown, unnamed wildlings. You don't know how many there are. It's confusing. And then throughout the battle sequence, they're just getting killed. And I'm like, who is that? Who got killed? Was that the Hound who just got killed? Oh, no, it was a wildling. And it was very, I don't know, it was like really spotty, patchy, the battle sequences. I felt jarred by them. So yeah, I wasn't really crazy about that episode. And also, you know, they get their zombie. Then there's this ridiculous concept of them on this island, you know, and only they can cross for a while. And before they do that, Jon sends Gendry. So, I mean, yeah, I get it. Like David and Dan talked about this. They needed a way for the characters to be safe, but still have to fight a couple at the same time. So they came up with this island idea in the middle of a frozen lake. And it's just so, oh, God. I mean, I was laughing. I was watching this episode. I was shaking my head and laughing. The battles, you know, there's a moment when Jon Snow, everything goes quiet. And you hear the strings. And Jon's looking around the battlefield. I'm like, okay, all right. This doesn't have anywhere near the same emotional weight as Battle of the Bastards did. So, you know, you're not really doing a whole lot for me here. But it happened. Thoros, rip. Thoros was okay, I guess. You know, they're not really taking the risks of the previous seasons because we lost only Thoros, and that was it really from that battle. I expected at least 2 other characters to die. But Gendry ends up running. I mean, listen, the geography, some people have done the math. They could have been on that island for 3 days. 3 days not wearing their hoods in the freezing cold. I don't know how much food they have, but they're out there in the middle. And the Night King has javelins, but they're fine. And it takes one of the Hound's mistakes. He throws a rock for them to cross over. The battle scene itself is very confusing and just ugh. It had a couple good moments. When Dany comes, any of that stuff with the dragon was awesome. And it made sense. I really liked it. Seeing the dragon get killed by the Night King's javelin was awesome. Jon not jumping on the dragon and instead choosing to fight a couple of extra wildlings for no reason and then falling into the water was not so awesome. And it made me irrationally angry because I knew Jon was just going to pop out the other side and be fine. And he was. It turns out if you go into water with heavy armor, even if it's the coldest water in all of Westeros, not only do you not get hypothermia and drown, but you're okay. You're fine. You just come back up. No problem. So a lot of convenience. And I think, you know, the reason that happened is so we could see Uncle Benjen ex machina. I'm fine with the dragon coming because they told Gendry to go get Daenerys. So he ran back for a couple hours, whatever. They send a raven. That could take like a day or two. And then Dany comes. That could take a day or two. But it happened. So I was okay with the dragon coming to save them. Uncle Benjen showing up. And then it's just like, hi, Benjen. He goes. You know, I liked Benjen in the previous episode. He was effectively Cold Hands from the book. If you haven't read the books, there's a character who lives beyond the wall on a big fucking dead moose called Cold Hands. And he helps Bran, I believe, right? Or Sam, one of the two. Anyway, the point is that Benjen being Cold Hands is fine by me. I like that. Part of me feels like Jon Snow seeing Benjen was very fan servicey because in the books, you know, Jon always wonders about Uncle Benjen. You know, whenever he's beyond the wall, he's thinking about his uncle. It was a big thing for him. So finally you get their reunion and it's just hi and bye. And then Benjen is like, there's no time. What do you mean there's no time, son? Get on the horse. But he didn't, and instead he gets himself killed, even though he's already dead. I've heard a couple theories. One theory is that Bran is able to communicate with Benjen like the three-eyed raven was and sent him to Jon, and that's fine. The timing of it was just like dumb action stuff, though. Like, this is, again, a show that, for me, is very grounded in reality in a lot of events. Not reality necessarily, but in logic to some extent, and rational behavior. And then, you know, you have characters showing up at the exact moment to save another character. It's been happening a lot. So I get that Benjen probably wanted to die because he was beyond the wall for so long and he wanted to die on his terms. It's just dumb. That's it. It's just dumb, I think. So rip Benjen, and Jon comes back, passes out, you know, and then he and Dany have a moment. So I guess we'll talk about Jon and Dany. Jon and Dany together. Let's start with that. Jon and Dany. Hi, Dany. They have good chemistry. Emilia Clarke and Kit Harington look like they belong together on screen. And that's a good thing because this relationship feels a little rushed. And I think, again, it has a lot to do with just the fact that we don't have as much time. We've got 7 episodes. And it comes to this point where you just feel like you got to get the things done. We got to move. We got to get there because we're wrapping up and because the show's almost over. And that's a shame for a show that took its time with the material. it feels a little cheap. It feels like we're getting cheated a bit. Again, this is coming from someone who's still a big fan, but yeah, their love plot was fine. I mean, I'll buy it because they're both good looking, and they just think each other like they're just like, oh shit, damn, you're good looking, son. But I buy the love plot because, you know, by the time they're in the boat together and Jon is, you know, recovering from, I guess, hypothermia that kicked in a little late, and they're holding hands, I feel like that moment is a good moment because Jon finally sees someone that has some level of honor. Aside from her being ridiculously good looking, she is a good leader, you know, and she, well, kind of, mostly, and she has a goal, and she's got, she wants to make things better. And Jon, I think, really respects that. And she saved him. You know, she proved like he was going to bend the knee to her because she proved she was a good person. And I like that. I like that Jon saw that strength in her. And how could you not at that point? You know, here's the king in the north. Here's the queen from the east or whatever. I guess it just kind of makes sense. Some people say it was very forced. I'm not on board the forced train. You know, getting them together again was quick, which is why it's good they have chemistry together on the screen. But I understand it and I buy it, and that was one of my, you know, I didn't have any problems with them looking at each other and, you know, wanting to get that boat sex started early. I thought it was fine. I thought it made sense. I feel like the characters do, aside from politically being really good for each other, which is in medieval culture, that was like the best reason. But I mean, you know, there's definitely something. And the other thing is too, Daenerys, she always kind of had this romanticized idea about Rhaegar Targaryen, about like him being, you know, kind of moody and a little sad looking, a little mopey, but also a really good person, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'm explaining that really poorly. But the point is, Jon has those traits because, spoilers, you know, he's Rhaegar's son. And I feel like it would be obvious for Dany to pick up on those traits if it's just genetic, and you know, and she does, I guess. So I'm okay with their relationship. Before we talk about boat sex, I'll say that Kit Harington has improved his Jon Snow performances to the point where I think he's great. Not just good, but great as the character. So I love Jon's stuff. Sometimes it was a little boring, but I love it. And he's one of the most honorable characters, but he's a little smarter in some ways than his dad was, but he still suffers from dumb honor syndrome, which is to say that he can get himself into some trouble. In episode 7, he did. He didn't want to bend the knee, or rather, sorry, he didn't want to call off support for Daenerys, and so that enrages Cersei, and she calls off the meeting. So that's a very stark thing for him to do. You know, his whole arc of being a bastard and realizing his true potential it's the hero's journey, but it's a little more complex than that. And he also has had this kind of power thrust upon him that he never really wanted, which would make him a good ruler because he doesn't really want it. I mean, he's just doing it because it's the right thing to do. Dany wants the power, but I think her and Jon are good for each other in a lot of ways because Jon, I feel, mellows her out. You know, she goes from 1,000 titles and blood and fury and, you know, her wanting to do these rash things to when they're on the boat together, Jon's like, you'll be a good queen. And she's like, I hope I deserve it. And I was like, okay, there's a bit of a thing. I think they work well with each other. So, yeah, and it's like, you know, that's a good thing because Dany was annoying the fuck out of me for a little while there. She was like, you know, I think she strayed too far from her roots, and maybe she got a little too in her own head with the power. And I feel like now she's definitely in a better place. She knows what she has to do. She saw the army of the dead, which is why Tyrion's stupid plan, at the very least, convinced Dany that this shit was real. So that's the thing that's good. And she's going to save Westeros, so she wants to do the right thing. And again, this is great. This is a good thing, because her character arc went all over the place too. And I'm not going to go through all of it. But by the time you get to season 7, she's here, she's ready to conquer, and yet, I don't know, she became a little unlikable. With her and Jon being closer, I feel like she's much more grounded, she's much more likable again. And so I'm on board for the relationship. I know that's probably not what people were expecting me to say, but I think it works on a couple levels. There's another thing I wanted to talk about. Was it Dany or? Well, I guess we could talk about boat sex real quick. Boat sex was good, I guess. They had sex to a voiceover about, Jon's parents. Oh boy, whoops. And then you find out that, she's his aunt. Whoops. Someone online wrote, Jon's going to feel creeped out by this, but Dany's going to be wet enough to drown a toddler. I was like, okay, that's a good way to put it. But, yeah, their whole thing is, if it wasn't completely spelled out before, now it's totally spelled out when Sam and Bran get together in episode 7, and they're talking about, Jon needs to know his true parentage. He is a Targaryen. I was like, wow. So how are you going to do this? And then we get to see Rhaegar, who looked a lot like Viserys, which was fine. Viserys and Rhaegar apparently looked alike, but also Viserys modeled his appearance off of Rhaegar. Yeah, and then, you kind of have this this thing of the incest is not even the weirdest part of Game of Thrones. That's the weird thing for me. It's like between fucking Jaime and Cersei and the Targaryens, it's almost at this point expected. But we'll see how Jon reacts to that next season. But it was good to see I liked the voiceover. I liked that you get to find out Jon is the true heir to the throne, which I don't think he'll want. As him and Dany like consummate, and also, I think it's pretty clear they're in love, which is perfect. I'm not going to go too far into predictions of season 8, but George R. Martin has said that it will be bittersweet, and the ending to this series will be bittersweet. So, I'm wondering who's going to live, who's going to die, who will end up ruling. Will there be anything left to rule? Maybe the kingdom is destroyed, but the characters live. I mean, who knows? But at the moment, there is some level of hope. But then you have Cersei, who's going to abandon her promise and hire the fucking Golden Company to have a war, and reclaim the Seven Kingdoms while they're up north fighting the real threat, which is to say, Zombie King. And it's like, come on, fuck off, Cersei. Needed to be like that, though. This character is too stubborn to not do that, and also the story is too complex to just have good versus evil. So I think it just has to be that. Let's see. Bronn was good this season. He's got a lot of good one-liners. The Hound was awesome. The Hound, dare I say, killed almost every scene he was in. Potential Clegane Bowl hype. He's going to come for him. Fucking, him and the Mountain had a moment together. It was, a lot of stuff that I felt could have been done a little differently, but, some really good character moments that were snuffled in there, whatever. What else? A couple more things I want to talk about, and I can't think of them at the moment. The scene with Theon and Jon was great, and Jon tells Theon, you don't have to choose. You can be a Greyjoy and a Stark. That was perfect. And also kind of mirrors what's happening with Jon in his own heritage, which he doesn't know yet. So, good scene. The whole Theon thing was... Oh, we could talk about Euron, but the whole Theon thing was kind of weird. Like, his arc is now just going to be to save his sister. And, like, you know, he gets kicked in the balls and he starts laughing. And then everyone's like, yeah, we like this guy. It's a good arc for him. I don't think anyone's had as much of an arc as Theon has. He went from good to bad to good to weak to fuck. Now he's got to find his strength. I mean, you know, it's going to be a really, really interesting way for the character to develop next season. Where is he going to rescue her? Is he going to end up inheriting the Iron Islands? I think Yara is going to die. I think he's going to end up being the leader of the Ironborn, and things are going to change as a result. That's my thought. Euron Greyjoy, I didn't really like this character last season. I was like, who the fuck is this dick? This season, they put him in some ridiculous outfits. They turned him into a rock star. His whole character, like his movement, was so weird. But, you know, he sold it. I ended up hating this guy. And, you know, credit to the actor for doing such a good job. His entrance into the battle was one of the best in ever. It was so over the top. It was so campy. I know some people had a problem with it, but you know what? I'll take it. It was schlocky. It was fun. And for a character like Euron Greyjoy, it worked. You know, these are the fucking Ironborn. They're not rational people. So I'm okay with it. I definitely, we needed a new villain, or we needed someone to come in there and take some of that hate. And Euron is a good candidate. They didn't really use him a whole lot this season. I mean, just in a couple strategic spots, especially when his ships got a chance to teleport, which they did frequently. But whatever. I mean, what's done is done. What matters now is that this series finds a satisfactory way to wrap up. I'd be okay with this 8th season not coming out until like 2019 or 2020, as long as it means they find a way to wrap things up. It's 6 episodes. The rumor is that there's going to be an hour and a half per episode. So that's good, if that's the case. And, you know, we'll see what happens, really. I think that the pieces are in place for a lot of cool shit. You know, the wall is destroyed now. The final scene was great. The CG was amazing. We saw the wall come crashing down as a result of the ice dragon. It was terrifying, by the way. That fucking thing, the way it moved, so fast, creepy. The flame looked good. It had like weight to it. I don't, you know, who knows what happened to Tormund and Beric. I guess we'll find out next season. But, shit, you know, Grey Worm sex. I think he just went down on Missandei. I think that was, you know, we didn't have a lot of time this season, so that's why a good 7 minutes of screen time were dedicated to Grey Worm eating Missandei's box. Very necessary, very, very appropriate use of our screen time. But hey, you do what you can, right? Tastes like flour. Sorry. It was not my favorite scene, but hey, it's what it is. Missandei's definitely... I mean, what's her character? It's they get to talk about boys, and then sometimes she translates a little bit. She tells people her titles, Dany's titles, and then she's, you know, getting eaten out a bit. Okay, well, that's uncomfortable, but it happened. Anyway, what was I saying? Oh, right, the wall came down. The White Walkers are on the move. Winter is more than here. Shit's gonna get real. There's gonna be some real stuff happening next season. And Winterfell, will it be prepared? Who knows? You know, we're at the very end game, and it's sad that, something that's been with me for the past 6 years of my life is now coming to an end. But, it's better. Excuse me. God, I have a lot of interruptions today from my stomach, but I feel like every time I think about the end of the show, I also think, well, okay, it's about time. The story, it's long. There's a lot. It's time. And then the other part of me wants Winds of Winter from George, which I've almost given up on. I mean, he's probably having a rough time. For as much as we criticize David and Dan for taking shortcuts and for just trying to end this thing, could you imagine George? Like, he doesn't want to put out garbage. He wants to put out something good. He wants to continue the legacy of these characters. And it's got to be real difficult. Like, the Myronese knot, which is how the fuck do you get these characters together and then figure out where to go from there. It's just a lot. And so I would like to see George's take. I think it's going to be quite different with the same ending. So, yeah, who knows, man? Who knows? I guess next season we'll see. I mean, I'll do this again next year or whenever it comes out, year and a half. And we'll hope that things are a little bit better in terms of writing. Hopefully they rally and they bring this thing home, and not succumb to lazy ideas and actually, continue the quality. And, the battles and the dragons are great. Ice Dragon was awesome and a very unexpected surprise for me. But I feel like that doesn't compare to something like the Red Wedding or, Ned's head getting cut off ultimately. So that's just me. I'm excited for next season, very much so. This season had a lot to offer. It made me do a lot of thinking, a lot of rewatching, and it's good that the characters are in a place that can be, there's room to go. There's places to go. So, I guess that's it. I know there's a lot more. Do you guys have any questions? Whew. God, that's a lot of talking. But yeah, any questions would be great. And then I can just talk about them. And then I can stop. I got that stupid Mario Rabbids game. Guess I'll be playing that later. Will this be on the test? Absolutely. It's just nice to not talk for a second. How tall are you? That's not a Game of Thrones question. Predictions for season 8. I don't really have too many, but I think we're going to find out that Tyrion did something stupid. I think there's going to be a big battle that's going to be interrupted by the Golden Company and the Lannister army. I think we're going to see Clegane Bowl. One of the main characters is going to die, if not more than one. I mean, of the Tyrion, Dany, Jon trio, it's going to be bittersweet. This will be on Full Sauce, yeah. I'm 6 foot tall. How would you end the show? I would have Dany and Jon together. I would. I mean, I know it's a little cliche, but I would like to see them, Westeros is destroyed. The Night King takes another of Dany's dragons, and somehow they manage to overcome in the end, but only after King's Landing is destroyed, Winterfell's destroyed. So many thousands of people die, hundreds of thousands, and a lot of our main characters die fighting. We're going to see a lot of deaths next season. I would love to see Jon and Dany eventually triumph, and Dany rules while Jon fucks off to Winterfell or something. Or I don't know. I'm not really sure, but it would be nice. I just don't think it's going to happen like that. I would also like to see Bran warg back in time and then become the Night King. Whether intentionally or accidental. Intentionally because he knows it'll unite the Seven Kingdoms, or accidental because he just wants to stop this from happening and he gets turned into the Night King. Also, Tyrion Targaryen. No, actually, I don't want that at all. To distract you when Sigur Rós showed up at the Purple Wedding. No, it didn't, because they didn't speak. Nor do I know what Sigur Rós looks like. Everyone knows what Ed Sheeran looks like. He was in frame for a very long time too. Sigur Rós, I didn't mind. There was also like a couple Coldplay guys at the Red Wedding. What'd you think of Jaime this new season? Brave. Better than last season's Jaime, and good to finally see his arc be realized. What's the subplot you want most closure on? What do I want most closure on? Well, we got the Lyanna stuff. Most of the big questions have been answered. I'd like to... I don't know. I don't really have anything else. What do you guys think? Read Knight of the Seven Kingdoms yet? Dunk and Egg Anthology. I haven't. But I know there are going to be more Game of Thrones TV. So, when that happens, we might see Dunk and Egg. We might see Robert's Rebellion. We might see the Dance of Dragons. We might see a lot of stuff. Is Nintendo going to do a Splatfest for the Clegane Bowl? What's the better show right now, Game of Thrones or Rick and Morty? What would you consider executed better? Rick and Morty is, at the moment, executed really well. It's really refined. But they also don't have to deal with this massive overarching story. So I feel like some of the writing is a little sloppy on Game of Thrones lately, but I still like it better. Rick and Morty is just, here's an episode, and, here's another one, and they're doing a good job with that. You can't really compare apples and oranges. Which, if any, characters would you like to see come back as whites? Hodor. Bran being Brandon the Builder. I read about that. I'd be down for a scene at the end of the series where Bran tries to prevent all this from happening, and he ends up becoming Bran the Builder, and Bran the Banker, Bran the Baker, and every other Bran, as the theory goes. Would you recommend reading the books still after watching this far? Absolutely. They're amazing, they're worth it, and you get so much more, and you'll really, really grow to appreciate the show even more. The last scene of the show will be Bran waking up from falling down in season 1. The end. Any of the Game of Thrones merchandise I own, I would fucking throw it in a pit and just light it up. It's nice to see less than 100 viewers. Very chill stream. Yeah. I mean, these happen from time to time. Usually at night, I do, we did a music night the other night. That was pretty chill. Sometimes we do a movie. That was almost Tommy Wiseau, the way I said that. Sometimes we do a movie. But yeah, it's nice. Especially if everyone here is chill. That's the other thing I like. Bran is everyone. Have you read The World of Ice and Fire? I have it. I haven't read all of it, but I've read a good chunk of it. Do you think Bran is the Night King? I talked about that earlier. I think it would make a nice circuitous motion. I think it would be kind of cool to see something like that. Not entirely necessary, but it would definitely give the whole story a bit of extra weight. So maybe. Remember how Hodor was stuck saying hold the door and was destined to do what he said? What if the Mad King was stuck with burning people because of something that's to come? What if... I read a theory that Bran has something to do with the Mad King seeing the fate of the world. Like the Mad King sees the White Walkers, he sees the Night King, and he just goes crazy from that. That would be kind of cool. That would in some ways be better than Bran being the Night King if the Mad King somehow got visions of the White Walkers and he set all these events in motion accidentally. Maybe not better, but it would be kind of all right. What about the theory that Sam writes the story of the whole series at the end? Tolkien did it. We don't need that. I wouldn't say, like, there's a throwaway line in the show about there's a line in the show about the Sam telling the Maester that the name of the book isn't that good, and that may have been just a joke. But if the show ends with Sam closing a page in a book and putting his quill down, I'm going to shit a throne. So I guess that's it. Anything else? Any final? Did I miss any characters that you wanted me to talk about? I'm sure I did. There's just too many characters. Like Brienne, I didn't talk about. She's been, she had a fight scene with Arya that was kind of okay, but she's been her arc has been realized. So she really just, she's just there, and she was like talking to Jaime and stuff. So really not a whole lot to say. Podrick tripod pain. One thing I'll appreciate is this from the story perspective, like a little thing, is that when Bronn asks Pod to go get a beer with him and Brienne like nods knowingly, I like that because it's kind of the idea of what if this is all just a big trap? What if this is all just one big, plot? And Brienne's happy that Bronn is going to keep Pod safe. That, and because the two actors that play Bronn and Cersei hate each other because they used to date. Look it up. Alfie Allen was amazing this season. A lot of great performances this season. Seriously. Alfie Allen was fantastic. Sorry, Arya can't stop Brienne swinging her sword. I'm not about to buy that. No, I know. Brienne has all this power and height, and Arya can have a little toothpick sword, and she can wield it with one hand, and it stops the blade. Maybe they were just going easy on each other, or maybe Brienne was going easy on Arya. What'd you think of Bronn this season? I'm shocked that Bronn is still in this show, but he is a fan favorite. In the book, Ilyn Payne is Jaime's sword teacher. Ilyn Payne is who is with Jaime through a lot of that stuff. And Ilyn Payne is a character that just cackles. He doesn't have a tongue. So it's weird that the show would go the exact opposite direction and give Jaime Bronn, which is great, by the way. I think that's an improvement. I'm shocked that Bronn is still around. We see a little development from Bronn. I feel like he's slightly kind of come around to respect and appreciate some of these characters, and he had a lot of great one-liners, and I think the character is more than just one-liners, and when a character becomes only one-liners, it's like, oh, get the fuck out of here. Like the Hound talking like, I like chicken. It's like, no, if the place he was in had any other food, he would have liked that food. The chicken was irrelevant. I'm going on a weird tangent, don't worry about it, but yeah, I think Bronn was fine in the show, and I think most of the characters were handled pretty good, but there's some notable exceptions that turned into like, oh God, what's happening here? But mostly good. Lord of Stokeworth, yeah. People hyped Rhaegar to be honorable and noble, but he did this massive dick thing by annulling his marriage to his wife and 2 kids, and named his other kid after a kid with a previous wife. No, I know. Rhaegar very, very much made some mistakes. Also, Lyanna made some mistakes, too. The whole rebellion was founded on Lyanna having been kidnapped. She didn't tell her family that any of this was happening. She didn't tell anyone. And it looked like she was kidnapped. And as a result, Robert went mental. And also, someone like Robert, who's got that temper, you don't want to fuck with him. And she kind of did. And then Ned had to cover for her for years. It was just like the romance aspect of it was cool and everything. But I think these are two very flawed, imperfect characters who made some big mistakes that set a lot of these events in motion. Vinny, which character do you see yourself in most? I have a couple of answers. Jaime is a character that I relate to because, we're all kind of flawed, and we all have these things that you don't like and you want to be better at. You want to have more honor. You want to, Jaime's a slow learner. And, I relate to Jaime because I want to be a better person always. And I like that Jaime goes from being like a cocky, confident, like fucking Prince Charming into a person, who wants to do the right thing more. And he did do the right thing. Him kingslaying was actually the best thing he could have done, but he was totally misunderstood. And it ate away at him. I also relate to Jon because I was a mopey son of a bitch when I was younger. And in some ways, like, Jon had family, but I was an only child. And I guess the feeling of being alone, whatever he had, this is a really weird question that I'm answering, but the point is I can relate to various aspects of a lot of characters. I can relate to some of Tyrion too, because he's a smart ass motherfucker. I got a bit of a smart mouth on me. So those are characters I have aspects of, and I can appreciate them. What do you guys think? I don't think Rhaegar told her to name the kid Aegon. Also, Lyanna was 16 when this happened in the books. Oh, yeah? Well, show Jaime is an idiot. Book Jaime is a lot more likable and wakes up a lot quicker. But show Jaime finally kind of gets there. So he's just a late learner. Lyanna Mormont. Oh, you mean one-liner little girl who everyone loves because she spouts one-liners and she's so tough. But yeah, she became like a fan favorite last season, and I was worried that was going to affect. Like, there was always, this worry that this season there was just going to be shots of Lyanna Mormont saying something grown up. Everyone's going to look at her and be like, "Aw," and then and that's it. But they used her sparingly, so I give her credit. I give them credit. They used her like twice, and in one of those occasions, she opposed Jon, so that was fine. She was fine. But yeah, I think that's about it. Let me just read this. Would love to see a young Bobby B. Hey, maybe HBO will grant your wish. You never know. Okay. Well, I'm done. Thank you for sticking around and checking out this, I guess, almost podcast of Game of Thrones. It's been a good season, but it's also been a dopey fucking season. And I feel like everybody has had their moment. Some of their moments weren't so great. Little Arya and Sansa drama ended up being kind of annoying more than anything. But, we got to see some character meetings. The final question I see, which character meeting would you like to see most in season 8? I want to see Bran and Jaime. I wouldn't mind Bran and Jaime would be great because Bran can say, "You pushed me." And then Jaime apologizes and he's like, no, don't apologize. You set me on the path to become the three-eyed raven. And Jaime's like, "What the fuck are you talking about?" And then Bran says to Jaime, "You were so beautiful the moment you were fucking your sister in the tower." No, but let's hope that next season relies more on characters dictating the flow of the story rather than fan service and big spectacle. I know we have to have that, but I think there's definitely a way to bring this back around. Episode 7 proved it. It was a good episode. There was some dumb shit, there was some good shit, but mostly I loved it. Mostly it was good. Mostly it's still one of the best shows on TV. And that's why we give it such shit, because we want to see it be its best. Because when it's at its best, as I said earlier, it's some of the best fiction I've ever seen. So, thank you. I'll be around later, more than likely, with that stupid meme Mario Rabbids game. And I'll see you later. Bye. I'll see you in a couple years when Game of Thrones Season 8 is finished. Take it easy.